He was suffering really poorly with memory,
Yeah.
and he went to this place and they taught him how to remember things by association. Now he was terrific. He said, really? He said, where can I get that? He said, my wife knows. Wait a minute. What's the name of that red flower? He said, oh yeah, rose. Yeah, rose.
Yeah.
As long as we can still laugh about it, it's okay.
No, it's not funny. It's not so funny.
As long as your wife can laugh at
It's
that.
not so funny. Oh, I block on such terrible things. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing. You know, people I know, like, I've known them for 1,000 years, and like, all of a sudden,
My grandchildren, I sometimes can't believe the names. It's like this.
You can't
Children,
remember
scares me. My grandchildren, my grandchildren. All of a sudden, what's the name? And I'm afraid to ask my wife. So I go for a couple of weeks, sometimes a month. She can bring up the name or something.
Take pictures of their Teudat Zehut. You can remember the birthdays.
birthdays, forget it. I never knew my kids' birthdays. I remember once our pediatrician retired. I had to go and register for with a new pediatrician. I came into the office with all my kids trailing behind me. Not, at the time, it wasn't all of them, but there were 9 of the 11. So they said to me, okay, so now you have to, what are your birthday? So what's her name? Rivka Ruchel. So they're already beginning to laugh. Rivka Ruchel, they didn't know how to spell Ruchel, how to spell it. So when's her birthday? I said, Ruchel, when's your birthday? Tell me the birthday. So they're smiling, So anyway, this happens with each one of the kids. Bela, Echebe, they're all good. And finally I come to one. They say to me, okay, and this time the whole office is in hysterics. They say to me, okay, so this is what I say, her name is Chayefra. How do you spell Chayefra? Okay, when's her birthday? I said, this one I know. So she says, yeah, when is it? I said, like Bomer.
Today's poem, I remember it.
Jokes are part of it.
That's what everybody remembers.
I write them down.
Yeah, these are not jokes. Those are the Yichusas, but in the Gemara they mentioned. Yeah. Who is Nasser? You know the Gemara. I don't know. You know he knows all the Gemara. And the Gemara. No, it was Rabbi. It wasn't just Rabbi, there were other ones also.
They remember the
Yeah.
Do you remember when they were in the marketplace and this guy gets over the mobile? What do you do? And you say it's a laugh?
No, that's a different Maybe it's only the horn.
Petit pot.
I saw the Gemara. Those are the only 2 sentences. No, it's not that.
Petit pot, meaning everybody who needs to know about it knows about it, and no one's done anything about it. So, that's petit pot. Emphasis on the B. No, what's the question?
Where's the Gemara that says Rabbi would start a Shiur with Milsim?
That way?
He's testing the Olam. He knows where the Gemara is. That says the Rabbis would be Masra the Shiur, with Milsim the Chuzim.
It was Rabba or Rava? I think it was Rava. It was Rabba?
Why not? Why can't there be 2 gear size?
That's a different question.
Elevated.
Okay, let's learn Torah. Okay.
Anyway, one of the questions was that Chaim asked, Reb Chaim, asked about in last week's Sedra, when Moshe Rabbeinu's begging off, trying to get out of this being commissioned as the Goyel, so he says to Hashem finally, Hashem, he says, I'm not a person of speech. Not from yesterday, not the day before yesterday. Not from a week ago. I am a kvad peh and a kvad loshen. So, first of all, what does that mean that his mouth is heavy and his tongue is heavy? And then this week's Sedra says, Ani aral sfasayim. I am, my lips are sealed. So, what's the difference? That was Reb Chaim's question.
What are the two Lashonis again?
Last week, there's three Lashonis. One is Kiana and Kichavad Peh, Chavad Loshen Anoichi, and the other one is An Yaral Sfasayim.
Saying it's more than what he felt about himself. He didn't have mirrors to look at him. You know. It's not how he felt his mouth was. That's too simplistic.
When he said Elul Zolim, the whole, is he still impaired?
So there, the Medrash Taka says that you see that Torah has the power to heal. It says, for Medrash, right at the beginning of the Borim, the Medrash Rabbah says, you see the power of Torah to heal, because earlier Moshe says, Kichvad Peh, and all of a sudden now he's talking. So
the Shekhinah and there until no, the Shekhinah just, it wasn't really Moshe speaking.
That's a medrash, right? The
What?
medrash says.
That's what I'm asking on this, right?
The medrash that says that the Torah heals from.
that's the Medrash Rabbah, yeah. Torah heals. But now he's saying that Shekhinah medabers v'terech groinai. The Shekhinah spoke through him.
Well, healed his self-esteem.
What?
Get his self-esteem. That's a good deal.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what occurs to me. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu had a physical disability, which was a product of. I'm going to get Josh in here. Ellie, there's room here. Sit in this room.
I guess their advantage is becoming an old fogey.
That's about the only one.
Well, I get a discount at half price on the buses, on the train here. So that's worth something.
Physical disability.
Right. So there's.
And I'm exempt from jury duty in the States.
We know that Moshe Rabbeinu had a physical problem, which, according to the way Chazal describe it, happened when from the time when he was a child in the palace of the Pharaoh, and Pari saw him taking his crown, putting it on his head, and he understood that to be a bad omen. And then his advisors told him that they should try this test and put a pile of glowing coals and another pile of gold and see which one he would take. If he'd take the gold, that would indicate that he had a sense of what he was doing. But if he took the glowing coal, then it means he's just attracted by shiny things. It has no significance. And he reached for the gold, and a malach came and pushed his hand towards the coal, and he ended up burning his lips. So
Should have burned his hand.
what?
Should have burned his hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, he should have burned his hand. He should have burned his hand, right?
He went like this.
Huh?
But then he would have burned his hand.
Pick it up.
Right. Oh, we don't. There's no reference to that.
Gotta check the emergency room records.
Doctors never stop being doctors.
All lawyers. So
Perhaps the malach caused him to have BRLs on the side, because that's another like, okay, he's a baby. So if you say he's a baby, he went for the shiny stuff. But as he's growing up, if he was this speaker, if he had this way of speaking that everyone listened to him, it might be another.
right. But meanwhile, he's a stutterer. So he's a quad loshain. But there's another problem with people speak. And I think by one of the Rishonim, maybe the Ran, in his drasha says that the reason that he was a stutterer was so that the world would know that Moshe Rabbeinu's ability to command the respect of Klal Yisrael was not from any kind of charisma that he had. He was not an orator. He couldn't. He could not persuade them by virtue of his oratorial ability because he was a stutterer, and it was all content. It was all the power of what he had to say, not how he said it. But then there's there's some people who they're not necessarily stutterers, but for them to be able to explain things doesn't come easily. I had a Rebbe in my early years in high school who it was just hard to understand what he was saying.
But he was a genius.
Huh?
But he was a genius. Or
I don't know if he was a genius. He just
I mean, I know a lot of dyslexic geniuses. They don't communicate well, but they're the sharpest minds, memory. But articulating their thoughts is not clear.
right. So there's something about either not having the right words. I've often thought about whether or not the fact that somebody doesn't communicate ideas clearly is because they're not clear about the ideas, or but just because they can't formulate it clearly. Huh?
The way they have always understood it, that could be incorrect, but that Moshe was within a realm, within a paradigm that, when you start to articulate things, you start to create a physical essence of of something that's beyond that. It's almost metaphysical or esoteric. And so because he understood things from so many dimensions, to try and articulate it and bring it down to earth was a very difficult thing. It was almost impossible. It was only, I think it was only after High Sinai that when things became clear. So that's when Moshe was at that tickle by his speech. There was a...
Right, so what you're saying is probably what that Al's Fosayim is about. But right now I think that this Quad Pad, Quad Loshon is where Moshe Rabbeinu was at the time, and that was, I'm number one, physically I can't get the words out, and then...
Which one is that?
That's Quad Loshon.
Well, the Lashon is physically not
My tongue, my tongue. Pad is more not being able to...
When we say stuttering, do we mean literally stuttering, or we just...
I don't know why that's somehow popularly the way...
Right, and then the cold wouldn't cause the stuttering. The stuttering is a whole other condition.
Yeah.
So is it two levels?
Something maybe, I don't know, it could be.
Maybe that's why the double
I'm not sure why, but that's kind of the popular thing is that he was a stutterer. I'm not sure.
And even to today, they don't really understand stuttering so much in terms of like whether it was like some latent fear that a kid had, and like maybe something scared him, and then carried it to his adulthood. Is something broken? They don't really have a clear picture of exactly what causes it. And then some people have the ability to fix it. There's a guy in the shul that does. He wrote a book on it.
And what happened?
We have a guy in the shul. He's a stutterer. He wrote a book on it. Called The Gift of Stuttering. He spent his teenage years stuttering. He couldn't even call his friends. People would call his house and he would say, oh, now he gives Dafnei Mishra. So something got him through it.
And he doesn't stutter now.
He does.
Still does.
But he somehow figured out how to tap into, like, get over that fear. He takes a few deep breaths and he goes. He's a kohen, he does.
Lands and does the presentations for his company.
Yeah.
So sometimes, there's this Gemara that says, who should you go to? Who should you make to be your Rav? Who should be your mentor? Someone who's like an angel. So, as foremost, they would, a Rav who's like an angel, what does that mean? They say that in order for someone, and it's not uncommon that for people who have really a very comprehensive grasp of things and they think very deeply, that they're very much into their headspace, and they can't somehow distill what they're doing in a way that it's accessible to someone who is of lesser intellectual ability. And they're not willing to do that. They're not willing to, to get out of their headspace, and somehow it's beneath them. So they're constantly involved in, when they're teaching, they're constantly involved in where they're going with their thoughts. So he says that the difference between a person and an angel, a human being and an angel, is that a malach is called an oimed. It's called someone who stops, because an angel is created with a certain nature, and he can't change it. He can't make it any better. He can't lose it. I mean, he is what he is, because that's the nature of it. Whereas a human being with his bechira can be a haylech, he can be an oileh, or he can be a yered. He has the ability to grow, and so in order for a person to be a good teacher, he has to be able to stop and consider who he's talking to, and craft the thoughts so that the recipient will be in a position to process them. So he says, if a Rav is demet Malach, that he can stop instead of being in his own headspace, then that's the person from whom you want to learn. Because if the person is not capable of stopping, so you're not going to be able to do that. So there is this problem some people have, which is being able to distill their thoughts and make them available. Moshe Rabbeinu said, "I'm a kvad lashon." Somehow, I can't get my tongue to coordinate with my brain somehow. And what's more, I'm not a good teacher. I can't formulate the right words. That's before. Now, once the Rabbi Michel is commissioned, then that's not really his problem anymore. His problem now is that he's aral tzfasayim. So, what's your name?
Ryan.
Huh?
Ryan.
Ryan. As Ryan was saying earlier, I believe that the Alter Rebbe
Who's your tzedus?
whose yurtzeit is today, right? Balatanya quotes the Maharal. So he says as follows: that I'm going to tell you some words. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just want to tell you the words. He says as follows, that our neshamas basically come from an olam hatikun, where the divine energy that sustains us is commensurate with our kelim. It's commensurate with our ability to work with what we're getting. But before this olam hatikun, there is this balance between the divine hashpah and our ability to process it. The previous existence, which is, or the previous phase of creation, is this world where the eires were greater than the kelim. So that's where supposedly that's where this event happened that it enabled this world ultimately to become a world where there was evil, because in all of the previous phases of creation, where they were too proximate, they were too close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be able to tolerate evil. So there was this shvira, where the eires were greater than the kelim, where the divine presence was more than what the instruments could handle. So he said that Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama came from that previous olam, and that the eires that stream that flowed into him in this world were far greater than he could articulate. There's no way, he had no words, he could not in any which way be able to explain what he was experiencing. So he was aral tzfasayim, basically.
The English word ineffable comes to mind. Like they talk about an ineffable experience.
It's inexpressible.
Yeah.
This is before he was saying it's like when he came time to lead the Yidden to Matan Torah, he could articulate these things because that's what he had to do. You couldn't have a leader that couldn't communicate what Hashem wanted him to communicate. It
Right.
was all the potential that Hashem put in him. Is that what we're saying?
The Nefesh Chaim's, we've been learning about the Haber.
Yeah.
We learned that Adam Rishon and Moshe Rabbeinu and Mashiach have that level of neshama. So Mashiach, we know, is going to be able to really zap it to us, into the world. So there's a tikkun of that problem in the Messianic process, that neshama will be able to fulfill that role.
Well, but we'll also be in a different place then.
Well, also that Rosh Chodesh Shvat next week, and Moshe began to dictate on the Sefer Devarim, and the Medrash talks about how it was Merape Lashon. There's an indication that now he's a man of Devarim, of words.
On the third of Hill.
Healing.
So in terms of that symptom and its capacity to, so that was already corrected by the time, and maybe in the Merape Lashon. So there was a tikkun in his instruments.
I think what at least one. No, one of the things that happened is that he was not called upon to have to communicate everything that he was experiencing. In other words, as the Ben Shalom said, you got to teach the Torah, you got to teach the Torah Shabbat Pad, so. I mean, so you can do those things. The question is, once you want to do something about, and let's say in our own experience. So one of the things we always talk about is that the way in which we learn, the way in which we do mitzvahs, is supposed to be that we're trying to tune in, we're trying to listen, to what somehow at that moment speaks to us from that mitzvah or from that what we're learning. So sometimes it's we can say to us this I get this inspiration, I get this idea, I get this message from putting on tefillin or from giving tzedakah, whatever it is. I mean, if it is possible for us, if we want to take a few moments to say to ourselves at this moment, how does this contribute to me? How does this elevate me? How does this change my life? And or how can I become a better person because of this? So there are times when we have that sensitivity, and when we do, in fact, somehow get some sort of an experience from it, and there are times when we're just doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we're not necessarily responding to what the message is. Moshe Rabbeinu is capable of transmitting Torah and transmitting the halachas and the shiurim and all the things that the question is, when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu being able to transmit to Klal Yisrael the vast import, the vast, the depth of what each mitzvah has to offer, that he's going to get lost, because what he sees is so immense that it challenges his ability to put anything into words.
That imply that he experienced things that he could not transmit.
That he could not transmit.
In other words, there was things that he was aware of that he just couldn't know.
I think we see that in Pirkei Avos, it's mentioned in Pirkei Avos, it's Moshe Kibel from Sino Masara. So the distinction between Kibel and receiving everything, and Masara, there's a quote. But I think what I was going to say initially was that it's not necessarily that Moshe received the tikkun when we came to Har Sinai by his Kalim, that he was now able to communicate certain things. It could also be from the other side, that in the same way that a mathematics professor at the university can never teach really a Kita Aleph child But when that child gets to university level, so like when Bnei Israel got to Har Sinai, they were up at that, the 49th Darga, they were now, they're able to receive that which Moshe Rabbeinu was able to see. So it's not that his neshama was still the neshama. So it would be that his physical expression of the neshama has to remain the same. It can't be that changed, rather that we change.
What about his years as the leader of Kush?
What?
I mean, he knew what he could deliver as a leader. It wasn't that he hadn't led anybody. From what age? When did he run away? Till
Not sure whether that, but he didn't come back until he was 80. And he was maybe 40 years in Kush.
he led them. He was the boss. He knew what he could lead and what he couldn't lead.
Well, doesn't the Medrash say he became the king in Kush?
Yeah, they made him king, and he would not. He refused to cohabit with the queen, which finally resulted in their removing him, and his having to leave there. I think that's all in the Sefer HaYosher, if I'm not mistaken. All that.
In the course of this massive amatni with Paro, we find that Moshe Rabbeinu improves his ability to fulfill that role.
I don't think so, because you see that Moshe spoke. Apparently, he spoke with his limitations, and which concerned Moshe Rabbeinu, because he felt that was going to obstruct or impede his efficacy with Pare. And then whatever he said, then Aaron HaKohen would repeat what had to be said. Apparently, maybe he said it in a clearer way. So I don't know, I don't know how the passage goes. He'll be your interpreter. Huh? Yeah, and he'll speak on your behalf. So, but nonetheless, Moshe Rabbeinu had to speak because there was a certain power in his in his speech, which came from his person, who he was, and then there was to make sure that in addition to the power of the message, that Paro really understood the boundaries of the message. So Aaron HaKohen had to understand, so take that energy and put it into
What did he
form.
speak? Lashon HaKodesh? Like, Paro didn't understand Lashon HaKodesh?
We know that Paro didn't pick it from the Yosef story.
He didn't understand English. He did understand English. Did not.
And he was inspired.
Was that?
That was the whole Yosef matter.
Sorry?
That was the whole Yosef matter.
Yeah.
He didn't know.
But many years passed by. It could have changed also. This
And we don't know if it's a Paro.
That's right.
But Moshe grew up in the palace. He had a common language.
It's interesting, Shmos is referred to as Golos HaDibur.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that whole Koach HaDibur is tainted, diminished or something. When Moshe spoke to Bnei Yisrael, is it also through Aaron?
Is it also what?
Is Aaron also Moshe's mouthpiece vis-a-vis Bnei Yisrael?
Do we find anything to that effect? I don't think so.
But the whole Zach that he spoke to Bnei Israel, how did one person speak to the whole Am? It was not natural.
In the
That was the way he taught. He taught first.
In the Parsha Haman, Moshe tells Aaron to tell Klal Yisrael to turn toward the Midbar, and uses Aaron as a spokesman.
Well, in terms of the transmission, Rashi quotes Chazal that the way it worked is that Moshe Rabbeinu would have, he would hear the mitzvah and its details from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He would come out of the Olayed and he would teach it to Aaron HaKohen. Then Aaron HaKohen would come and sit next to him. Then he would call in Aaron's 4 sons, and he would repeat it again for Aaron's 4 sons. Then the 4 of them would, 2 of them would sit to Aaron's right, 2 of them would sit to Moshe's left, and they would call in the Shivim Zakenim, and he would teach the Shivim Zakenim. And the Shivim Zakenim would go around, they would sit, and then they called in apparently the masses, and they taught it again. So Aaron HaKohen heard it 4 times, the children heard it 3 times, the Zakenim heard it twice, and Klal Yisrael heard it once. But then it would be, again it would be repeated over and over again by...
When it says V'yidaber Moshe el Bnei Yisrael, that's the process it's describing.
Even though.
Yeah. So the big challenge that we face as parents or as grandparents or as teachers is how do we communicate effectively with young people who are not, they're not mature enough to appreciate our experience. And one of the things that we hear all the time, and especially with the kids who are at risk, is that we've lost the ability to make ourselves understood, our experience understood to them in a way which would enable them to make better decisions. You can't put your head on anybody's shoulders. What?
Does the Rav see that gap more today than like when he grew up? Was there a smaller gap between the Rav's father and grandfather, or even among the Rav's friends growing up? I feel like
well, for sure. When I was growing up, the older generation were all immigrants. So, number one, their children. The children who they brought into the world over here in America were in a totally different place than them. And they were not able to really communicate with them in any meaningful way. These kids grew up understanding that their parents came from a different culture and that they were now products of this new culture, and therefore there wasn't a whole lot of...
So it was even bigger difference then, is that?
Yeah.
So it was even worse.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And less texting then.
What?
Less texting.
Can I just clarify the Rav's Lashon is our ability to communicate the same thing as our ability to influence? No,
basically, I would think that communicate means to make ourselves understood in a way that they would be able to, that they would be responsive to it. So, today we are pretty much in the same world as they are. The difference is that we have experience, so we know what the impact of not being disciplined or not being not being able to postpone gratification, and that all of the things that are today so damaging to our children. So how do we communicate to them effectively so that that we can? How do we get down to their level in a way that they will appreciate what we have to offer? And so far, I've seen this in America, and I've seen it here in Eretz Yisrael when the people come to talk about the fact that they've lost their connection with the kids. The kids are just not. They're not listening. They're not. I mean, parents are. It's like Mark Twain said when he was 17 years old. He really was astounded as how stupid his parents were, and then when he was 21, he was amazed at how much they had learned in 4 years. So, but there's something. I spoke to somebody who runs a drop-in place in Brooklyn, for kids who are not in the yeshiva and they're kind of out in the street. So he has this drop-in place, and they have pool tables, and they have all kinds of stuff where the kids can hang out. So they tried to create a kind of a safe place for them. So I had a youngster in Milwaukee who kind of run away from home. He was 16 years old, and he was hanging out on the streets of New York. And so I wanted to refer him to this place. I don't remember what the name of the place was. Anyway, so I asked the guy who was running this program if he would reach out to this youngster. He said to him, no. I said to him, why not? He said, 16 years old, there's nobody to talk to. He says, we have found that before someone turns 18, there's nobody to talk to.
There's no what?
There's nobody to talk to. It just, you can talk, you can make all the sense in the world, but it's not.
You just need
What?
deep the
It's
16-year-old,
very frightening
deep
because the
patience.
damage that these kids can do to themselves before they come of age. Do you deal with adolescents? No?
Only my own. I mean, the oldest.
Older adolescents, you say.
When I would teach psychotherapists, I would always say that every therapist should have some adolescence in their practice, because that's what makes you continually humble.
I worked in an adolescent lockup, in mental hospital.
Oh, so what, these kids were there because what? They were suicidal, they were cutting, what were they doing?
They were either
Eating
criminals
disorders?
or had psychological impairments. So some of them were forced in there, and some of them were volunteered themselves or their parents. But they were basically, most of them were under 18. And this was residential treatment, meaning they went to school there and everything, and they were there for a year or two. And in order to get out, they had to meet certain behavioral measures. So they had an incentive, number one. There was an incentive for them to get out. That really limited them. And number two, the single most effective thing that I found, I worked with, inner city black kids also, the single most effective thing was to go to where they are. To talk about their interests. One very powerful thing was I would look at, the handwriting and say, they were so interested to hear what their handwriting is about. So if you go, if it's about them, then they get interested. And there's a great book, Del Faber, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, How to Listen to Kids Will Talk. I recommend it to a lot of people. But basically,
Who's the author? Who's the author?
Faber, Del Faber. Wonderful book. But basically, the key skill was to, where are you at? Not what do I want from you. If they talk about themselves, you can get to them. And they want to get out, so they have an incentive. And you have something to offer them in that situation because you can help them get out.
Meir Shapiro has this vote on where is the Haftorah with Alicia and I think it's the Ben Hashunamis who, he gives her a bracha that she should have a child, huh?
Where's Vayira?
What?
Where's Vayira?
Vayira? Let's see. Vayira. So, and Elisha came to the house, and the child was dead, lying on his bed. And he came in and he closed the door, and he was mispal. And then it says, Vayal, Vayishkav ala Yeled. And then when he lied down on the boy, Piv al Piv, and he put his mouth to his mouth, V'inav aleinav, and his eyes to his eyes, V'kapav al kapav, and his hands to his hands. Vayigav alo, and then he kind of like breathed on him. Vayacham sal, and the body of the lad began to become warm. So Meir Shapiro said, and you got to remember, he said this in his time, which was a much more innocent time. He said, if you want to be able to take a young person who is, who's kind of lost, he says, so the only way to do it is vayasem piv al piv. You have to be able to talk his language. Put your mouth to his mouth. You have to be able to speak his language. Ve'einav al einav, and you have to be able to look at the world the way he sees the world. Ve'kapav al kapav, and you have to put your hands to his hands and feel the world like he feels the world. And then the flesh of the lad will begin to warm up. So I mean, it's as true today as it was then, as it was in the time of Elisha. When we try to talk to kids, and we don't see the world the way they see it, we have to be able to understand how they see the world. We have to understand what the words mean to them, and we have to understand how they feel the world. So, but it is a huge, huge challenge, and for parents, it's a nightmare, just a nightmare, because there's such anguish, such pain in watching someone that you love that much, and not, that they're in pain, and that they're at risk, and you can't penetrate, you can't get through to them, and I don't know. I don't know how to do it. And Baal Shem HaKadosh said, he told somebody who came to him and had this problem with his child, Baal Shem Tov said to him, you have to love him more. You just have to love him more. Right.
Good, thank you.